Welcome to a football show, Monday edition. That's right, Paul Kuharsky, not only reporter, co-host, also producer as well. My name is Braden Gall. You can get to me on the internet at Braden Gall. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. And of course, yes, we are actually live this time after a 4th of July holiday that featured a week that featured all kinds of different programming as well. PK, how are you, man?
I am well. How are you? How old are you? Happy birthday today on the anniversary of your birth.
43 going on 100 is how it feels sometimes.
43. Oh, to 43. Be 43.
Yeah. You said a niece that's my age. That's concerning for you.
What?
You said you had a niece that is my age, basically? Is that correct?
Yeah. I have a niece.
Man.
I have a couple nieces that are your age.
So if you want to get into the comment section, it's a loose show. We're going to have fun because it's still a holiday for me. So it's still a holiday weekend. Hope everybody had a great, safe, and happy 4th of July. I hope everybody's fingers and toes are still currently intact, and I hope all of the dogs have settled down over the weekend. My dog is sort of so dumb that he doesn't really get weirded out by the fireworks. He's very sweet. The girls love him. He treats the girls great. That's all I care about. But he's not my OG pup, so, but he's good with the fireworks.
I now have a dog who's pretty good with the fireworks, and we have a neighbor who put on quite a show, so we just watched from our back porch, and the dog sat on my wife's lap and seemed to be kind of watching, but was overall calm. My old dog, may he rest in peace, was not of a similar ilk, so we did not miss that part of the 4th of July.
Same for me. My old dog, R.I.P. As well. Always a little weirded out by that. I think it's because he was too smart. He knew something was up. He was like, something's going on, Dad. What's going on out there? Redemption, good to see you in the comments. As I said, if you want to get in, we are going to have some conversations today that are a little less Titans-centric on the team and on 2025. We're going to kind of look back on, of course, Steve McNair. But I really am interested because I know you've covered him basically the entire time he was here. And I wanted to sort of talk to his relationship with the city of Nashville, which is had a circuitous journey, obviously a very beloved figure right now, and had an interesting start to his career, certainly a tragic end to his life on the 4th of July in 2009, 16 years ago. So, of course, those of you who've listened to me ever do any content in the city know that I could I looked out my balcony and I could see the police lights that were going off right there, and we all wondered what the hell was happening. And we walk up and we look at it and we go, what is this? And we, and so it was just a very weird, surreal time, certainly for me as a young sort of media member, not really in Nashville at the time. It was more, I was working for other companies. You, of course, on the beat. You and I have talked about some of the content that's come out post his death that's kind of gone back. And I actually read, I don't know if you saw this, but Mike Florio wrote a piece, I think it was yesterday or this weekend, and still asking the same questions that I think a lot of folks have asked for many, many years. Well, I want to ask you how valid those are, how real those should be. So we'll get to a lot of that, of course. And then, and this sort of ties in, but it was a different question because you started texting me about Arsenal, which you're the first person who's trash talked me about my brand new Arsenal fandom. And
such a predictable pick. It's so disappointing.
Well, it's fine. You can be disappointed. We'll get there. But there was a off the field, off the pitch issue with a former player that you raised. And I think it does raise an interesting conversation around art and artist, separating the two. I was looking at the Ryman list, and Louis C.K. is playing at the Ryman coming up in a couple of weeks. And I was like, man, I really love his comedy, but I cannot give him money. So I want to get into a conversation about that with you as well. Sinkers Beverages, give them a few bucks, $10 on the Basement East website. You can go to basementeast.com. You can buy $10 tickets that will get you food and booze and raffle tickets, and you'll be entered to win a bunch of cool stuff. There's going to be all kinds of music and vinyl there. It's a birthday party celebrating Sinkers Beverages, 40th birthday party at Basement East, August 9th. Come on out, $10, and all the money goes to a charity. So what kind of party? What? There's no better party than that. So come on out to Sinkers' 40th birthday party, PK. You're invited. You're invited.
Sounds like a big event. What was the date on that?
August 9th. You're invited, but you have to spend $20 on a ticket. Because
I'd be willing to spend $20 on a ticket.
Charity.
I just don't know what my life is looking like on August 9th.
Probably, if I had to guess, that might be one of the Titans preseason games. I don't know. Probably not. Maybe not yet. I don't know if they're there yet. So we'll see. Redemption says, Braden, if you're an Arsenal fan, I hope you've seen the Fever Pitch film. Now,
the Fever Pitch film is about the Red Sox, so it's very meaningful to you. The book is phenomenal. I've met.
Can
Nick
you believe
Hornby.
that I have this right here in my hand?
I've met Nick Hornby, who's phenomenal author and dude. But the movie was bastardized. They couldn't, for some reason, do a film about England. They had to make it about Boston.
This I've only read like 10 pages. It's phenomenal. Very, very well done so far. So also high fidelity, brilliant movie. So but there we go. There's an original Fever Pitch film. I did not know that. Is that true, Paul? Do you know that?
I don't know of it. I'm sure it can't be worse than the Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore.
All right,
which is it's a nice rom-com. It just bastardized the book.
Yes, this was like the first thing that I did as soon as we got done with me picking Arsenal. If you don't know,
why did you go through this exercise to pick Arsenal?
All right, stop. Hang on. Let me do the proper.
Will Bowling's an Arsenal guy, so I presume Wes Bowling's an Arsenal guy. So you did a podcast series to pick your co-host's team. Whoa, that's riveting stuff. I'm glad I didn't listen.
You've known me for a very long time. Do you think that I picked it because Wes Bowling? Anyway,
no, but I think that team should be eliminated when it's your co-host's team. There's no drama to it whatsoever.
You are my co-host, and I didn't eliminate Chelsea.
Yeah, but I didn't co-host the podcast during which you were choosing the team.
All right, hang on.
Nonsense.
Hang on.
If you listen to it, you should go and somehow retract your listen so he doesn't get a download for it. So it's foolish exercise.
Club and Country podcast, which is a fantastic listen by Wes Bowling and Tim Sullivan, who cover Nashville SC. By the way, 14 unbeaten for Nashville SC. A fantastic stretch right now. One of the best teams. They beat Philadelphia, who is second in the Eastern Conference on Saturday, much to my two daughters' delight on a Hani Mukhtar PK. Very, very late, like 98th, 99th minute on Saturday night. And so Nashville SC, great, go listen to the show. But I decided during the international break, and I've had this idea for many, many years, and I just didn't know how to kind of finalize it all. But Wes Bowling and Steve Cavendish of the Nashville Banter did a great job sort of carrying me through selecting an EPL team. And I wanted it to be based on all the different criteria. And I did as honest an analysis of this as possible. I came into it, PK, thinking there's no chance I was going to pick Newcastle or Arsenal. And so that means the fact that I got there, how I did, actually makes it more authentic and more honest than I could have done.
Weak. Let's do a podcast where you pick a baseball team. I'll co-host it with you, and then you pick the Yankees.
Well, much like Manchester United, I was never going to pick anything that resembled the Yankees. So didn't pick Manchester United. It was one of the first Big Six eliminated. Anyway, go listen to the series. It's really good. Wes did a great job. Had nothing to do with me.
I have to veto him asking you to listen to the series. I thought it was a good idea, but where he winds up is absolutely ridiculous and makes it. He just muted me.
Go listen to the show. It's good. Wes did a great job. He put a lot of hard work into it.
Wes put a lot of hard work into it, and he got Braden to land on his team. What a coincidence.
He was trying not to. He was actually trying not to.
Of all the places it can't land there, and it landed there. It's blasphemous.
It's better. They're better than all the other big
sinful.
English. Better than all the other big London.
And
clubs.
He adopted a rapey culture, so he's into teams that allow for rapists to play, accused rapists. Pretty
all right, we'll get to that. Settle
that
out.
Arsenal embraced a guy who was.
Good news is I'll never have to watch a match with that guy on the team, but we'll get to that in a second. Just settle down. Okay, so. You started. Go check out the. Don't go listen to the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I guess is what I supposed to say.
There's nothing offensive about my podcast.
You of course did some remembering of Steve McNair on your show on Thursday on the YouTube page and on the podcast app of choice. So go check those shows out. But I am just curious. Like one of the things. So I want to start with the current. I want to start with the current stuff, and that is again. I kind of just Googled just to see what was out there. I wanted to see who was writing this stuff. And if it was a bunch of aggregated stuff that's written on like a random website, I just kind of ignored it because then it's just doing it for clicks to get into the, hey, Steve McNair kind of crops up as a subject every July 4th. It's going to be part of this. I kind of ignored that stuff. But I did find a few that were written by sort of longer term NFL experts, including Mike Florio. And I just want to ask you, how do you react when you see stuff? And he used phrases like, the quickly solved crime, that it's sort of like that the case was so quick to close, being super odd to some folks from the outside that weren't covering it at the time. I know you and I have talked about the recent podcast series that have been done and documentaries that were done around this. A nagging sense of injustice is another one that I read. When you see those stories written by folks that weren't on the beat, do you have a reaction outside of like the local national grudge that we all have currently?
Well, I don't think you have to be on the beat to, I mean, most of crime reporters were the people reporting it, so, the Tennessean people at that stage, 16 years ago, that was still very much the paper of record or the authority. If their people were saying, hey, this was too neat and clean, my sources have suspicions, all of that would hold a lot more water to me. This one guy wanted to write a book and really force the issue, and there have been documentaries. And look, a lot of documentarians do excellent work and raise questions that really hover. Everything that I've seen does a great job of raising questions and does no kind of job at answering questions. Well, I mean, in Conspiracy America circa 2025, everybody can raise questions. It's answers that you need. And so, look, that's how things work. This is a real shocker, what happened to Steve McNair. And it's hard for us to wrap our heads around it. But I'm an Occam's razor guy. And I don't see massive motive for some kind of setup of this. Some of the theories put forth seem ridiculous to me, that his wife set this whole thing up and all of that. So if you want me to believe something like Michelle McNair is behind it, I'm going to need some evidence. And I don't see any evidence. I just see people posing questions. Well, posing questions should do nothing to turn intelligent people into accepting theories. They're just theories. And there is evidence of the that leads to the conclusion that was ultimately reached. Now, if you find a hole in the conclusion that was ultimately reached, you can say, I don't feel good about the conclusion, but you can't jump to other conclusions for which there is no evidence.
The counterfactuals. It's funny. Like I find normally I think we are, to your point, gravitate towards the unknown, the mystery, the conspiracy theory. That's human beings, and especially in America, have long been lured by conspiracy theories because a lot of them all have that like small kernel of truth, right? That one tiny little thing that is so plausible that everyone just feels that that's the thing that leads to sort of disproving all the common sense evidence that exists. But I almost find like that we did this last year, because the documentary had come out. Was it Netflix that did the documentary or HBO?
Yeah.
One of the two.
We discussed it
and we talked about it. And we were talking about this at the Titans facility at the time with some folks in the building, and just it's regular conversation, nothing reporting here, just kind of all chatting about it. And so we covered it a little bit last year. I'm not sure what rehashing, to your point, unless we have a new answer or a new piece of evidence, I'm not as interested in rehashing the case of his death. I am really interested because listening to your show, it reminded me of all the moments that sort of like that the relationship between Steve McNair and the city of Nashville wasn't this perfect rosy thing that I think now Titans fans think about when they look at Cam Ward and they go, man, he plays like Steve McNair. He's going to be Steve McNair. And I'm curious, if I say, what is Steve McNair's legacy with Tennessee Titans fans? Do you have a different answer based on different periods of time?
Well, I think Steve McNair's legacy with Tennessee Titans fans, as is often the case when somebody dies prematurely, and is often the case when somebody dies tragically prematurely, got shined up. Not that he wouldn't. I mean, I think he'd have a great legacy were he alive today. I think that things get accelerated because you're putting a bow on a guy's life when you write an obituary, and when somebody's eulogized. We touched on this when we were talking about the running back debate, when you had your 12 debate topics, that I think Eddie George, because he is such a great human being, transferred a lot, gave away a lot of his role with the 99 era Titans, where he was very much the leader and the main cog in that team, because he's so magnanimous. Transferred a great degree of that to Steve in the funeral procession.
You in your show on Thursday, you used the phrase, "This was Eddie's team, Eddie's offense." And what I find interesting is that I think McNair's legacy, you also just said, shined up sort of the legacy. And Jim Morrison, I don't think was nearly as good a songwriter as people think he is. Like, I just don't. But you die early, you die young. The kind of the hero status tends to grow, as you say, you kind of shine it up. But what's interesting is that it's almost both for Steve. It's almost both. Like, he wasn't as appreciated in the moment as he should have been, but also he wasn't as maybe criticized in the moment as he should have. Does that make sense? Like, it was almost
because
both.
of the personal behavior. And
right.
So people who covered him and people who were close to him knew that he was not a faithful husband, and that he had, and that, the DUI was not necessarily a surprise, that he made the foolish thing to get behind the wheel, was a surprise, but that he, drank to excess at times was not a surprise to people who followed him closely or who knew him, and that he, was not a faithful husband was not a surprise. So the public, I think, was surprised by those things when those things became apparent. The DUI was a big surprise, and certainly the fact that he was mixed up with a girlfriend, and that was a big cause of his death. Nobody deserves to die, obviously, for any of their stuff, but that he was mixed up in something that led down this path, that he was mixed up in something was not a surprise to people that knew it. So for the general public, that was a big revelation, right? And that complicated the emotional stuff connected to this, where that part was not a surprise. The guns and the murder certainly was a shock to everybody, but that there was a girl that complicated his life was not a shock to people who were in tune with what was going on or how he lived.
What's interesting is that both of those legacies kind of changing in real time all stem from his death. I am curious now, as a follow-up to all of that, which is, as someone who very much, I was in college from 2000 to 2004, 2005. So like, when you're in college, you're in your own world. I wasn't working as a person in media. I was in Murfreesboro for 1 year and then Knoxville for 3. Like, I was not, I came back for games. I went to a bunch of games in 98, 99. I went to every home game in 99. I went to the Super Bowl with my family as a fan. And so, like, my point is that I knew the team. I followed the team. I was a sports fan. I was still a Packers fan at the time, but I was a sports fan and loved watching them here in town, and then went to college. And so what I don't remember, and I do remember like him being booed in 1999 in week 1 in his debut in Adelphia Coliseum, not the previous year in 98. For those that don't know, was at Vanderbilt. 97 was the first year in Tennessee, the Tennessee Oilers, which was in Memphis. So he had been in Nashville, but only for 1 year, not really at their stadium. And so what I want to ask you is
this city didn't jump on the Tennessee Oilers.
No, not at all. What I'm curious about is the legacy in the moment. Like, was it just Eddie? Was it, I remember Javon Curse just being this character that captured people's imaginations. Steve McNair, I think you have to go back and look at that position on the field and say, it's a pretty important position. What was his legacy in the moment? Was he appreciated in the moment? Was he appreciated appropriately by the city?
I think that 99 season, he was still having to win people over. And so in that first game against Cincinnati, he had a pretty good game. He had 15 3-touchdown games in his career, only one better than that. That was one of them. But, the Titans ran out to a big lead in that game. And I think there was a college football feel to it. Like, once you run out to a big lead, game's over. And the Bengals came back, and he had a couple bad moments. He threw a pick and he lost a fumble, and then he twisted his ankle very badly. And people were thinking, well, he's hit a wall here. We need O'Donnell to come in and save it. There was a little bit of a racial tinge to it for some people, for sure. And when he came limping back onto the field, he got booed. And then he led them to a Yancey Thigpen had also lost a fumble after a reception during the downturn that let the Bengals close down a 19-point lead. And then McNair led them on a touchdown drive and a field goal drive that won the game. And obviously, them winning that game got things started. They didn't lose a home game all season. We know the story of 1999 for the Titans. But Neil O'Donnell did wind up starting 5 games because McNair hurt his back. I think it was right after that. He might have played 2 games. It might have played 1 game.
He played 1 and then missed 5. What's interesting is 341 yards passing, 66% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 11 yards per attempt, 119 quarterback rating. That 341, only 5 games better in his career, better than that one.
Yeah. He got booed, and it turned into a big story. Big story. So the next day, or early that week, some people planted like yard signs along the median leading into the facility that were kind of apologetic or cheering him on. And then a publishing house flew a plane over the Titans facility. I don't know if it was Monday or if it was Wednesday, but it was while they were outside on the grass, saying, fly high McNair or something like that. That was clearly an apology as well. It was a big debate in the city that week. The racial element was a big debate in the city that week. And then O'Donnell comes in and goes, I think loses 1 game, And so there's some debate. I remember getting it and writing that McNair was unquestionably going to return to the starting job when he was healthy. And that was all of us presumed it, who were close to the team and knew the thinking of Fisher and Reese. But that was a big story because they were going good with O'Donnell. And again, this was not a NFL town per se that didn't understand you don't lose a job to injury and all of that. And so it was a bumpy ride for him, and he had not yet established that, the very thing in that game. If you look back at the Cincinnati game, at a different stage in his career, him coming back with that ankle taped up to that degree and leading those 2 scoring drives is what people loved him for. That's
what I find so interesting about that. And so here's what's really interesting, because if you go back and look, he's out for those 5 games. They do go 4-1. He comes back. They beat the Rams, of course,
which is the game of the year.
Famously, they go on to win. Now he scores.
Fred Miller's false starts against Javon Curse was a huge deal. Greatest show on turf. The Titans were being talked about, but nowhere near as much as the Rams were being talked about because they were out of nowhere, and they were doing it with these ridiculous receivers and the Kurt Warner story, right?
So he throws 2 touchdowns, but sub 50% completion percentage, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns. They win that game by 24-21. He comes back the very next game. They lose 17-0, get shut out by Miami, and he throws 3 interceptions. And I'm like the conviction now, again, this is where it's kind of weird. This is what I find so interesting about his career, because he's already been drafted 5 years earlier, and he'd already started 2 full seasons. So he is unquestionably the starting quarterback of the franchise. But because it's in a new building and kind of a new audience is watching him, and this is the other part of this equation, Nashville is a character in the story, because almost 80% of your season ticket holders are outside of Davidson County. And that's a different type of fan and different type of human that lives and operates inside Davidson County. Certainly more today.
Largely Williamson, right? A good percentage Williamson.
Yes, but Sumner, Rutherford, Wilson, it's, Hendersonville, Mount Juliet, Murfreesboro. And again, 2025, we have a different, population in Davidson County than we did in 1999. Yeah. But it's roughly the same. It's still, I would say, idealistically and philosophically, it's pretty similar. And so there is this. I could see Nashville is known for a few things. One is fair weather fans in general. Predators, Titans, Vanderbilt, you name it. It's fair weather. If the party's cool, we'll show up. We'll come. As soon as the party's not fun anymore and you're not winning games, we're quick to go to another party because there's so much to do in the city. And so I am fascinated by, do you have any recollection because then he doesn't throw a touchdown pass for 6 more games in that season, which is insane to me. If Ryan Tannehill or Marcus Mariota did not throw a touchdown pass for 7 games, like all hell would break loose.
Well, that really tells you how much it was Eddie George's team, right? That was the defense Eddie George team for them to continue to do well with him not producing on that level. And I didn't realize
they got destroyed by Baltimore. But other than that,
yeah, the Miami game and the Baltimore game were the two really bad showings.
6 games without a touchdown pass by a quarterback.
It's crazy. And I in looking through these pieces that I looked through for the podcast, there was one about how out of sync he was with the receivers after O'Donnell was in sync with the receivers. And we know receiver was not a good thing. So Mason's on that team. Dyson's on that team. Thigpen is on that team, but hurt some, if I'm remembering correctly. But O'Donnell was in sync with the receivers during those 5 games. And then McNair comes back and he's talking about, we're not going to stop throwing just because we're not in sync. But I'm sure, despite the fact that they continue to win, that there were a lot of rumblings like, hey, they can't get this together. And they had it together with O'Donnell.
It's also very much about this time. Like, you could still win games in the NFL like this.
Yeah.
In 1999. What's interesting is he threw 5 touchdowns. Now, remember, they beat Jacksonville twice that year. Jacksonville was 14-2. The only 2 losses they had in the regular season. Of course, they had to beat them a 3rd time, which is very rare in the postseason. They do that to get to the Super Bowl. Mark Brunell and Keenan McCardell and Jimmy Smith and Fred Taylor and all those great players on offense. He threw 5 touchdown passes in the second to last game of the regular season against Jacksonville. He threw 3 against the Bengals. That was 8. In all the other 9 games he played that year, he had 4 touchdown passes.
Yeah, that's a long way from the MVP season. Just 3 or 4 years later.
So I guess my theory, and I'm not trying to accomplish anything grandiose here with this conversation, but I am fascinated with Nashville's relationship with him, because today it feels very like hero-y. He was the guy, and those of you in the comments are like, man, if I had to pick any Titans quarterback to win a game today, I want him at his best.
That's not a hard selection.
And it's not, but like he is viewed as sort of this hero, this mythical guy, this tough guy that kind of in a Brett Favre kind of way, right? Small town in Mississippi, plays through the pain, dealt with a lot of stuff off the field with both his vices and his addiction, but also some of the pain that probably triggers some of that as well. But then it ends the way it does, but it starts the way it does as well. It's truly one of the more fascinating relationships that Nashville has with a sports figure. Pekka Rinne didn't do anything. Maybe not anything's the right. He goes to a Stanley Cup final and won a Vezina Trophy, so maybe actually is identical to Steve McNair. But he is beloved unequivocally because he has this perfect career. Yeah. Like, it's this perfect career that's defined easily, that exists in this kind of way. He comes from nowhere and he's played here his whole career, and he like all this stuff. And life's not normally that simple. And McNair's legacy is certainly not that simple.
Well, and I intentionally said about doing this podcast, I suggest you go back and listen to it. And go listen to Braden's thing on the soccer too.
Thank you.
Go listen to this, because I intentionally, I didn't do anything on the murder or on the end. I just mentioned it was the 16th anniversary. But what I did is I went back to a lot of the stuff I wrote and that Jim Wyatt wrote, but mostly stuff that I wrote, and pulled quotes about McNair and kind of started conversation topics off what McNair said about certain things. This getting booed, winning the MVP, the DUI, stuff like that. And went from there. But I think, he was a more complex guy. That booing story, I don't think people really remember. We just kind of glossed over it. I didn't remember. I did somebody else's podcast, and I talked about it. But then I was looking at the stats of the game, and I was like, "There's no way." And so I was like, "Hey, just for the record." At the end, I corrected myself. I'm not positive it was the Cincinnati game. Could have been the Atlanta game in the preseason. Kind of tied myself up in knots because I could out of the box score. It's hard to see
Right.
him getting booed, but it turned out that my memory was correct. And I should have just gone with what I thought. But you know, it is interesting how we remember him and how it all panned out, and the fact that just haven't been able to match him. He was a very good quarterback, and he had a lot of very good traits and a lot of very good moments. But it should not be that hard to match Steve McNair in your team's history. Ryan Tannehill at his best certainly did, but it was a short span of time. And that's a lot of the reason, if you connect and go full circle on this, for the hope with Cam Ward.
Yeah. Well, it's an excellent pod. Go check it out. I guess my last question on Mac, and then we'll kind of move on to this other topic, which is related, but not necessarily. And that is sort of like, what did you feel like you learned about like his motivation in the world, and his motivation in life? What made him the thing that he was, the toughness, the physicality? Like what did you learn covering him that you think you can explain now 20 years later that made him the guy, you know, that from 99 to 03 was as important and as good as anybody in the sport?
I think he just wanted to prove people right. You know, he had an older brother. He wanted to outshow that. He never wanted to be perceived as weak. He burnt his hand as a kid messing around, and he didn't want to like go to his mom for help. He stuck that burnt hand in a jar of Vaseline. I'm not sure how that feels, but that was his solution to sucking it up and being tough, even as a kid. But then, you know, with Floyd Reese and Jeff Fisher showing the faith that they did in him, he just wanted to prove them right. But he also, you know, look, I was critical of Marcus Mariota for not changing his ways. And there were times that I thought Steve should have changed his ways. Now, he obviously was ultimately good to very good, you know, but he took naps before games. That was his ritual. And it became like
Mariota,
a running thing, you know, find Steve a place to take a nap. So on the one hand, it's cute, but on the other hand, is that where people should be dedicating their energy? I thought he threw to the equipment men an awful lot. Joey Barranco, you know, he threw to a lot. Well, they had bad receivers for a long time. And there were times where I thought, like, shouldn't he be throwing to receivers right now? You know, but these things, because he had reached a certain level, were regarded as kind of like cute and
quirky
and quirky. Right. Yeah. And
charming almost.
Yeah. And the Titans would kill to have cute and charming and quirky stuff from their quarterback right now. Right.
Yeah, I agree. Hockey players. This is actually going to turn into a bit of a hockey conversation. Not really, but I think it's going in a place that I did not expect, but I think it's really smart, which is Redemption saying hockey players take naps before games. It's a long time thing. That is the case, but you're also flying at like 1 a.m. on a Tuesday and then have a game at like Wednesday night or Thursday night. And that's a little bit different. Eddie says Pekka is the Preds. And here's the question that I think gets us into the new conversation, which is Eddie says, I'm 25. I've spent my entire life watching Pekka play. Hero figure for me, doesn't even come close to describing him. Now, we can start this next conversation.
Let me go my Pekka plays. All right. Pekka, great for the team. Steve, great for the team. But Nashville makes too much out of its great people. Young organizations. Pekka, I know I'll set off a thing here. Not in the least bit statue worthy. Not in the least bit. Nor is McNair or anybody that's played for the Titans. Let the organization get old and get some context. And let a guy get old. Pekka doesn't need a statue when he's 35, 40.
I am not going to
let him be 60.
Would Derrick Henry be statue worthy?
Yeah, maybe when he's in the Hall of Fame and whatever. But these quick statues drive me crazy. Johnny Unitas is a statue guy. Johnny Unitas. Pekka Rinne is not Johnny Unitas.
We're on YouTube, PK. No one knows who that is. Anyway, I hope they do. I'm kidding. No, what's interesting is, and I don't disagree with the statue in particular, but I will push back a little bit. I think Pekka has a chance to get into the Hall of Fame. And if he does get into the Hall of Fame, then he
Hall of
is
Fame comes before a statue.
totally
Not
fair.
after.
Totally fair.
It's a
I was
wrong
gonna say Sinkers is a Hall of Fame liquor store, 4-time champion of liquor stores in Nashville, 4-time voted on by you, the consumers. Sign up for the in crowd. Special thanks to them for putting on the Predators Nashville draft party last couple Fridays ago. It was a great time. They're great supporters of all local sports and local businesses. Their 40th birthday party is coming up on August 9th. Go to basementeast.com and purchase your tickets. They're only $10. All the money goes to charity. You get food, you get drinks, you get music, you get entered into all kinds of prizes. It's going to be a ton of fun. The way I want to start this conference, and Shotgun Boys Barbecue, of course, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesdays through Sundays. Make sure you check out that brisket. It is award-winning. It's the best brisket in the city. So this is Pekka is actually a very good entry point into this conversation because Pekka Rinne, and I've said this about like my favorite musicians, like Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin or Jack White or just I don't know. I don't know how much you've ever met Bruce Springsteen if you've ever interacted with him. I have a feeling actually Bruce Springsteen probably is actually fairly authentic to who he is.
Very.
But I am always concerned, and having been around a lot of like whether it's media people that I looked up to growing up, writers, radio hosts, or athletes, I've always just been able to sort of like keep it my childhood view of them or my opinion of their like keep it at arm's reach because you don't really want to meet your heroes. In general, I don't think you really want to meet your heroes. They're almost always going to fail to live up to what you've done in your head to build them up. Like I've heard famously, because Robert Plant has hung around Nashville a bunch, I've heard famously you don't want to run into him.
I've seen him at I resisted approaching at Nashville.
And I've been told he's a little grumpy. Yeah. So you say you don't want to meet him. Jack White is weird as shit. And very tall. Like and I've heard all the arguments and the fights that he's had at schools with his kids. And
Isbell is probably a nice guy though.
I think he probably would be, and he's up that list a little bit. There's for sure he'd be up there. I say all of this to say Pekka Rinne is, while he is a little bit goofier and more fun than I think people realize that he lets on, he's got some of that side of him that is sort of the hockey, like once a hockey player, always a hockey player. They're always like one-lining, like talking shit to each other and having fun. He is the guy that he is. And having met him a bunch and gotten to know him and some of the things he's done, like he did something personally for me that I don't talk a lot about. I just think he is the guy that he comes across as. And he's one of the very few that is both the best player in franchise history, the most important player in franchise history, and one of the best humans in franchise history. And that's just a rare thing that doesn't exist. So I'm curious, and I had this conversation on Lamestream Sports with Steve Cavendish because I saw Louis C.K., and this for Titans fans is, I'm sure there's some players that are going to come to mind. For Preds fans, there's going to be players that come to mind. I'm sure there's Mets and Yankees players that come to mind. But I saw Louis C.K. on the Ryman's website, and I was like, God, that guy's a genius. Absolute comedic genius. One of my favorite comedians of our generation. And I just couldn't bring myself to give him the money to go watch the show. I just can't, based on knowing what he is and who he is and how he acts towards people. I couldn't do it. Brett Favre, my favorite player growing up as a kid. Pretty disappointing human. Like, really disappointing human. Rodgers is, I think, the area where I don't have to separate it. As a fan, I can appreciate Aaron Rodgers' brilliance and then just roll my eyes because it's not criminal, right? It's not like
he's just a jerk or a weirdo.
He's just a weirdo who sometimes can be jerky, but sometimes he wants to do that. McNair, having affairs, if every single person in this world that had an affair, male or female, was just deemed to be an atrocious human being, drinks too much, everybody in America that drinks too much, like the DUI is the population. Yeah, exactly. The DUI is different. The DUI is different behavior that crosses a line that endangers other people. So where are you at with art and artists, whether it's athletes, whether it's musicians, whether it's movies? Where are you at with this?
Well, I'll say this. Springsteen is my top guy, and Greg Nettles is my top guy. He's my number one athlete of all time, the guy that made me the baseball fan that I am. He is coming to a card show in Nashville at the Expo Center in Williamson County. Tara McCormick sent me this.
They have card shows still?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So this is within 10 miles of my house. I think it's on September 27th, a Saturday, where I will be flying to Miami, and I will reshape my flight to go to this. He's a notorious asshole. So I expect him to be curmudgeonly and difficult. And all I want is, and I've got some autographs of him. I don't know if you can get a selfie with the guy autograph signing or not. So I'll be disappointed if I can't. But to get a handshake and a picture of him signing for me will be great. There was a summer when I was doing Midday 180 where one of our goals was to do a heroes segment where we're all going to try to get our sports hero on the air. And I got a number for Greg Nettles and I left him a message just saying that's what I was trying to do. And I didn't hear back from him and I didn't expect it. But here, I'm going to turn to another guy I'm a great admirer of on this topic. Little Steven Van Zandt, consigliere to both Springsteen and Tony Soprano. And here's what he said about the art and the artist. I've always said the art is better than the artist. I think we should try to separate the art from the artist because it's literally two different things. Enjoy the art if you can. If you can separate it from the artist, enjoy it because we need it. Great art does an important function in our lives. It's not a luxury. It's an essential part of our quality of life. Here's the important part. If you eliminate every artist that's an asshole, there won't be any art left.
I mean, hard to argue with anything you said there. I do think there's first of all, this goes without saying, everyone has their own choice on where they draw the line. And I do think there's a difference between just general assholery and like criminal behavior.
No, I agree. And I'm with you on Louis C.K. I wouldn't spend, I spent money to see him before we knew what he was. I wouldn't spend money to see him now. But, if I was a guy that watched a lot of comedy specials on TV, I would have trouble not watching it.
I've tried.
There are people that I like who turn out to have whatever, and I can't dismiss it. That's why I don't buy, even in these divided times, particularly where right-wing people say, I am completely out on so-and-so because they have shown themselves to be a liberal, or during the Colin Kaepernick stuff, I am going to stop watching football. I just don't believe people have that kind of discipline. If you've been a lifelong football fan and then you decide, I don't like Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem, and I'm going to stop this habit of mine and stop liking this thing that I've always liked, I don't believe people are capable of that. I agree.
But let's bring it to the Titans. Rashard Matthews, who, of course, his brother died in service overseas. Rashard Matthews takes the knee. And I remember doing the show that morning, and I was like, me and Fitzy were trying to be like as open-minded as we could about it and saying, look, we're going to open up the phone lines. We're going to be accepting of all parties of this. And I had a black producer at the time who really hated the conversation and like got up and left the studio one time about this entire thing. And Rashard Matthews takes a knee out of his personal choice. And I was impressed because I think we got about half and half, where people are calling up saying, they're doing the very typical, I'm offended by this disrespecting the flag garbage. And then the other half saying, no, I served in the military. He has to fight for your freedom, to have the right to do this stuff. And like, I personally have my own view on it. But I just am like, the ratings didn't go down. Like the TV ratings didn't go down. People still watched. And I believe, and it's both the snowflakes, which I got, it's a funny story. I got called into my general's manager's office that show because I called somebody a snowflake, because they called up and they were like, I just can't handle this guy not taking a knee. That's disrespectful during the anthem. I'm not watching again. I was like, all right, snowflake, settle down. And you can't say that to people. I'm like, why? They call up and call me a snowflake every day. What are you talking about? Anyway, ratings didn't go down. And I long believe that if Rashard Matthews had been a 112 catch guy, nobody says a stinking word about him.
Beloved. Here's the example on the other extreme. But see, O.J. Simpson wasn't still doing something, right? So everybody was out on O.J. Not everybody, but a good share of the population, including me, completely out on O.J. Simpson. But O.J. Simpson wasn't doing any quote unquote art, wasn't still broadcasting or anything. There was nothing to miss after that. Well, right. I wouldn't hesitate to watch one of those old
like, was it Naked
police
Gun?
station, whatever. Naked Gun. Yeah. I'd watch Naked Gun now. I wouldn't say I'm not watching Naked Gun because OJ's in it. Even though I think OJ's one of the worst people in the history of mankind.
I listen to Michael Jackson all the time, all the time.
And he's a complete weirdo.
Yeah, and again, like this is not the same as analyzing the trial for OJ, right? Like, which was representative of a whole other issue altogether in terms of race balance in the country. I just find it. I find, look, at the end of the day, everyone has to choose their line, and if you are okay supporting Louis C.K. because you are able to separate his jokes on stage from what he does in his personal life, that's up to you. I couldn't do it. I do listen to Michael Jackson. I rooted for. Now the beauty of this is the perfect scenario is being a kid watching a player not having any knowledge of this stuff.
Right.
Like rooting for Brett Favre as a kid. I didn't. Sure, we had the Chimera pills hot tub thing. I don't remember what year that was, but it was pretty late after the Super Bowl, I think, and we kind of did brush it off. Like I didn't know any better. I was in high school, but taking money from poor kids and families and those in need of health insurance in Mississippi to build his daughter a volleyball stadium. Like pretty shitty thing to do.
But here's the other thing. Like you can also, I don't know if it's rationalizing, but the degree of your financial support, right? So if you're going to a Louis C.K. show, your money's going pretty directly to Louis C.K., right? But if you're going to watch Barry Bonds play, and I'm not equating what Barry Bonds did to what Louis C.K. did, but if you find it, morally indefensible.
One's more of an asshole.
Right. But if you find it morally indefensible what Barry Bonds did, but you go to see Barry Bonds play, well, if you're buying a ticket to see the Giants, you don't feel like your money's going directly to Barry Bonds, And if you're going to see Barry Bonds play in Atlanta, you certainly don't feel like your money's going directly to Barry Bonds. So, you can find all kind of way, I don't feel guilty if I'm going to see Barry Bonds, like I'm supporting Barry Bonds, but I also would like to have seen Barry Bonds play live, despite the fact that I'm very anti Barry Bonds.
I am
a different thing, but you would never say, well, I'd like to say I saw Louis C.K. live, right? That's a baseball player you want to put on your list.
No, I disagree.
Live, whereas a comedian, you don't want to put on your list of saying I saw him live. Now, two different crimes. So I'd rather find a better parallel, right? But if there was a baseball player accused of the same kind of stuff who was reinstated or whatever, we've got football players who've been reinstated, but you might want to say, I'm putting that guy on my list of players that I've seen play, but you wouldn't say I'm putting that comedian on my list of people. Different kind of art.
Wander Blanco. I think it's again. I think we are all look. I just admire people that can just, to your point, that have the discipline to do to excise the bad part of humanity.
I think it's a lot more talk than action.
I agree with you because ratings don't go down for NBA games. They don't go down for NFL games after certain things happen. They don't go down. The Cowboys sign a player who's a defensive end who has a trunk full of assault rifles. And he gets a ton of money, but as long as he can get to the quarterback, no one gives a shit.
Yeah, right.
We as a society, and I don't know if this ever changes, we as a society will forgive you for a lot if you are talented. Actors, politicians, musicians, athletes, if you entertain us, we will overlook everything. The Penn State fan who still talks about Joe Paterno, or Baylor fan who talks about Art Briles, and these are real heinous stuff. The fact that Hugh Freeze is coaching at Auburn, and I'm not talking about paying some players at Ole Miss. I'm talking about all the other weird shit he's done around women. The fact that we just if he wins a conference championship and they get to the playoff this year, he will be beloved in Auburn.
America loves the second act, but some people, like I'm thinking Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson didn't rebound. Now I know he's doing some stuff, but he's not. Didn't recover his level. I'm sure we could think of some others, but Mel Gibson.
Does Al Franken count?
Yeah, Al Franken, and
no, I'm convinced that Al Franken is the only human who's actually been canceled.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone's been canceled.
His timing was right at the wrong time. He's another good example. Now, and and his stuff was more behind the scenes, whereas
he didn't do anything really that wrong.
Yeah, and Mel Gibson was very loud. I mean, his tape recordings of his berating his wife or girlfriend are one thing, and then the anti-Semitism another thing. And there are certain things you can come back from more easily than others, which those lines don't make a lot of sense in a lot of instances. But Mel Gibson certainly did not recover the way a lot of other. Michael Richards hasn't recovered very well. So there's anti-Semitism and racism. Those are things you don't recover very well from.
Well, I don't. This all stemmed from you giving me a hard time about Arsenal, of course, who I ended up picking. Now,
so you picked a team that had a player that they covered for an entire season. Everybody knew there was a somebody in the EPL that had faced very serious rape. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know the story super well. But everybody knew there was an EPL player facing very serious rape charges who hadn't been pulled. And then finally, the case reached the stage where the name was out.
Which I think was last week, I think.
There's an Arsenal player who the team not only played, but was super complimentary of.
Now, they did not, they had no plans to re-sign him. That's not neither here nor there.
Great.
Neither here nor there. And again, I never watched him and I never rooted for him. So I don't know. But I think what's interesting is there is a point where if a player is under investigation and you have to let it play out. I think we could take this to the Titans. Like if somebody was privately accused of something, but you can't do anything publicly because that might also sway some form of guilt or innocence before the actual verdict of the case or the facts of the case are discovered. Is your sort of standard operating procedure on that to just sort of be like suspended indefinitely while we investigate the case?
NFL does that largely, right? The commissioner's exempt list. They decided after Ray Rice, pretty much, we're not going to wait for investigations because we'd have a guy playing conceivably in this situation for a year or a year and a half because the wheels of justice are so slow, and we'd look really bad to have this hanging over a guy's head. So we're going to take justice into our own hands, try to do our own investigation, which sometimes is absolutely ridiculous because you have no subpoena power. But we're going to put this guy on the shelf while things shake out, cost him a year and a half of his career, while he may wind up being judged innocent.
Right. What's interesting is, not to go back to the lens of soccer, but like the Messi-Ronaldo debate has always been framed around that element of this. I think Ronaldo's kind of a big tool bag, and there's been a lot of stories about alleged behavior around women, and Messi's like super married.
Yeah.
And so look, do I love the fact that the team I just selected had dealt with this? I hate it. I'm very, very thankful that he is not on the team. I'm very thankful about that. But the charges were, I guess, filed last week. And so that's when the name came out, and that's when everybody learned sort of who it officially was. And this is a midfielder, prominent midfielder on the team. So he's not a nobody, that's for sure. So
your team.
Sure. Again, Deshaun Watson is the one, right? Is the easy one to talk about. And I've done a lot of shows on ESPN debating this. It's like, where's the line? Like, if he's a Super Bowl champion quarterback for the Browns, you think the Browns fans would stop rooting for him? I bet a chunk of them would. And I applaud those for being disciplined. I don't hate the people that are willing to acknowledge, hey, I'm rooting for this guy, even though I think he's a terrible person. To your point about separating it all, like if the Titans had, one of those players and he ends up being a Hall of Fame quarterback, like, how do you tell an 8-year-old all these complex things that don't really belong in his brain or her brain, and that they can't root for their favorite player? Like, it's hard to separate that.
Well, a lot of it's got to do with time. So in Deshaun Watson's case, if he had come and played great from the beginning, all would have been forgiven by a lot of people. But
you mean Browns?
To the Browns, yeah. If he had arrived with the Browns and played well from the beginning, all would have been forgotten. But he comes and he's a disaster, and they're like, "Oh my God!" That compounded everything. And so now, I don't think he's ever going to have a chance to redo it. But now I do think there would be a lot of discipline in retaining contempt for him, even if he came and played super well and did lead them to a Super Bowl. I do think that there would be a segment of Browns fans that would not I mean, that would be one of the most complex stories ever. A team seeking a Super Bowl forever, getting there on the shoulders of a guy with all of this baggage. It would tear some people in half.
Yeah, Eddie asked about Justin Tucker. Would he still be on the Ravens if he wasn't a kicker and wasn't regressing? Which is interesting because he is maybe the greatest kicker of all time. So it is.
But he did have the yips last year.
Right,
so
right.
It really kind
Easy
of
to move on.
Up. Yeah.
So again, I think one of the most important points for this conversation is that Steve McNair, I don't think you need to do a lot of mental gymnastics to separate Steve McNair, the person, and Steve McNair, the player, because I don't think what he did. I mean, first of all, he paid the ultimate price on his own for some of his behavior. That's unfortunate. Like nobody deserves that, but like, I mean, obviously that's how he was in the situation to begin with. And so unfortunately that's what happened. It's tragic. It's sad. I think drinking too much and cheating on your spouse is not something you need to actively worry yourself about as a fan of something. I think it needs to cross over to something far greater. So kind of the reason I wanted to do this is I don't think, while the legacy is complicated, his relationship is complicated, there's good moments and bad moments and tragic moments and historic moments. I don't think you have to worry yourself about that with McNair. I think you can appreciate the greatness or the good that he delivered and not worry about the rest of it. But I do think, it will come a time for some team in this market, whether it's SC or the Titans or the Preds or somewhere else, where we're going to have to, like, remember James Franklin with the big case, the big assault case at Vanderbilt when he was winning 9 games. It's going to happen at some point, and you are going to have to decide, like, where's my personal line on this stuff? And
well, I mean, when they had that giant rape case, I don't know if that's what you're referring to at Vanderbilt. I mean, that shook a lot of people to the core. That a culture there. I mean, a culture's not going to control a guy who's got the capacity for that necessarily, but it still came out of that, and that was gut wrenching.
And to your point about Arsenal, Vanderbilt did everything possible it could have and should have done right away to manage the situation. They were like, James Franklin's on vacation, stay there, dude, don't come back, because we know you're going to mess with this investigation. They made him stay in Florida on vacation. They suspended the players immediately, did a full-blown investigation. They ended up getting charged with a crime, I think. So, like, there's ways also to handle it the way. And I will say this to you. I don't know if you won't enjoy this, but you and I have argued about NFL versus college for our entire relationship. And the biggest problem with college football is how much power an individual coach has in a community that is a very good football coach in college. Like the only way Joe Paterno and the Sandusky thing happens, the only way the Art Briles Baylor thing happens, the only way Hugh Freeze happens is because these guys turn into little deities and they have their own little feudal dictatorships in these little places. They control information. They control the flow of information. They control the power levers. They control the money. They are the most, I mean, I'm pretty sure Josh Heupel is the most expensive employee in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
So college football has a much worse case with this than almost anybody else in pro American sports.
Yeah. And Jason McDonald, we won't get into what you're saying there, but it's a point well raised.
There you go. All right. Thank you guys all for hanging out and listening. We do appreciate it. I know this is a little bit of a weird episode, but I know McNair on Friday, the tragic passing, 16-year anniversary, worth discussing for a few minutes. And I think his legacy is super, super interesting. He is a player that will never not be mentioned right away when comparing Tennessee Titans quarterbacks, and that's the way it should be. I saw you posting some of those old clips too. So go check out PK's Twitter handle and the website, paulkuharsky.com, the podcast, the YouTube page. A lot of interesting stuff. How big is the stack of newspaper articles that you have in your house?
I've got like their Kinko's boxes that fit like super big paper. I've got 4 boxes like that, and then another box or 2 of more letter size paper. Those were clips like to get jobs,
Right.
Those were the best things I wrote that I would photocopy and send out to apply for jobs. That's the root of those. But I also have
never got any of those. I guess you never got any of those jobs. I guess correct me if I'm wrong, PK, but while you were looking for that, I believe you went right to ESPN, right, to cover the Titans, and then
I did.
Came
I also
back
have
to
this, which is the Tennesseans
okay.
review of the 1999 season, which is a hell of a collector's item. And that has a
That's cool.
recap of every game. It's like my game
Yeah.
story boiled down, and then some end of the season pieces and stuff. So it's really cool.
I'd be fascinated to know all the jobs you applied for and didn't get.
I actually,
or didn't
as
want.
a quick aside, I had an offer from the Palm Beach Post to go cover the Dolphins not too long after I got here, probably after that 99 or 2000 season. And I was very tempted to go because it was a better paper than the Tennessean. It was not a Gannett paper, which was a big deal. And I was very tempted to go. And my parents said, you know, I had traipsed around the country. People know I went from Washington to Los Angeles to Oakland to Houston to Nashville in a very short period of time. And my parents said, you don't have to feel like you have to go.
Hey, take a breath, big guy.
Better job. Like you're in a good city and
Yeah.
you can stay. And that was very important to me. And I took their advice and it was much better for my life.
There you go. And here you are, 2025.
I had an offer later in Minnesota too, and didn't go.
Well, glad you all, I think I speak for everybody. Glad you stayed. So
I think some people would disagree, but Brett, thank you.
There you go. That's fair. And look, you can't win them all. It's not possible to win them all. All right, everybody out there, have a great rest of your week. Nick and I are back on Thursday. Sinkers Beverages tickets are available for Basement East August 9th. That's a Saturday. $10. All the money goes to charity. Food, booze, music. Going to be a lot of fun. Celebrate their 40th birthday party. It's going to be great. And of course, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Make sure you check them out. Award-winning brisket. The only mechanical bull at a barbecue joint in the city, and free parking as well. Right off Bradley Parkway. Fantastic. Not open today. Not open Tuesday, but open Wednesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Otherwise, paulkuharsky.com. Check him out there. Check out the YouTube page and the podcast as well. And like, review, subscribe, thumbs up, notifications turned on, follow on the socials, etc., etc., etc. Otherwise, great stuff, PK. Always a pleasure.
Time for some breakfast.
There you go. Have a good one, everybody. We will talk to you next time.